Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna continue what we started yesterday actually with the Dendrobiums, and we are going to focus on the beautiful Dendrobium harveyanum today. In case you missed it, what they had in common, both the Parisi and the harveyanum, is the fuzziness of the flowers. It's absolutely fantastic. I will have to look through my archive and find other orchids with fuzzy flowers, at least parts of the flowers, so I can make a sort of compilation. Would you guys like that? Because one of them just popped into my mind right now. Anyway, without further ado, here is a closer look at the Dendrobium harveyanum. And now for the Dendrobium harveyanum. This is an absolute premiere for me. I have never in my life seen this orchid in bloom, never had it, and it's almost a year since I have it in my collection. Now, I talked about this Dendrobium in a previous video. It took forever to establish in semi-hydroponics, but it is established now. It does have roots. It doesn't have new growth, I have to say. This is the only new growth this orchid produced. And it's really tiny. The flower spike comes from an older cane. This orchid can actually bloom from older canes, and finally they're plump. For the longest time they were really shriveled. So now it's adapted in semi-hydroponics, and I do hope it will do great, but I cannot guarantee that it will. At this point, we're testing it out, and as far as I know, there are quite a few people who do have some struggles and some issues with this orchid. Certainly, it is not as easygoing and friendly, let's say, as the Parisi or the Anosmum. This is something else. So let's talk a little bit about it, tell you a bit of my experience with it and what I gathered from articles. So this orchid is supposed to be a cool growing epiphyte, which is a little scary because my environment is rather warm. So maybe that's why it had issues adapting to semi-hydroponics. You can never know which orchid will have issues adapting and why exactly. Maybe indeed it was the temperature, but I have cooler growers that did adapt to semi-hydroponics really fast and are doing fine. And I also have cooler growers which never adapted to semi-hydroponics, and I had to move them to clay pots and moss, keeping them rather cool. So I'm not entirely sure in which category this orchid comes. I'm still gonna keep it in semi-hydroponics because it just established, but I would not be surprised if I would move it in a clay pot with sphagnum moss and try to maintain it rather cool, along with my other cool growers, my Miltoniopsis and so on, which are doing so great in this setup. You'll see. But indeed, it would appear that it is not a warm grower. Can it be grown in a warm environment? We shall find out. It is also supposed to bloom in February through April, and it is June right now. It's practically the beginning of summer here, so there we go. Blooming time will pretty much depend on environment and climate, not necessarily what the orchid is supposed to be doing at that particular time in its natural habitat. I also learned that this orchid blooms on the leafless canes which are older, so not on the new canes. Now, this Dendrobium has another thing in common with the Parisi. It is deciduous, apparently. I would say it's about semi-deciduous because the leaves you see in the back, they're more than 1 year old and they didn't fall just yet. But the leaves on these canes, they did fall. Also, it is suggested they bloom on leafless canes, so not necessarily the canes that just matured this season. I cannot tell you if this is true from experience because it hasn't been 2 or 3 years yet, but that's what the article says. And also, they suggest that we do offer a winter rest to this orchid. Again, I could not give a winter rest because the canes were just so shriveled. They were trying to grow roots and eventually they did. I kept watering this orchid during winter. Of course, with the fertilizer, I didn't go overboard. All of my grow space received minimal fertilizing during winter due to day length, due to temperature. Everybody receives less fertilizer, but I did not stop watering and fertilizing infrequently this orchid. And there we have it, we have blooms. So I'm not entirely sure how tricky it is to bloom this orchid. I can tell you it's quite tricky to acclimate in a warm climate, but that it can bloom without a drastic winter rest. Now, it is said that the flowers smell very much like honey. They are indeed fragrant, but I really don't believe they smell like honey. My nose might be different, but I will tell you exactly what they remind me of. They smell exactly 1-to-1 like dandelions. And I have the fragrance of the dandelion tattooed in my brain because I grew up in a house next to a little patch of grass which had wild dandelions growing, and I would collect the leaves of the dandelions and give them to the chickens because they love them. And I absolutely adored the dandelion flower, and it had this smell. It is indeed a little bit like honey, a little bit sweet, but it has that very, very specific fragrance of the dandelion, in my opinion, which is absolutely strange because look at these flowers. They're yellow, and the color they have is identical to the dandelion yellow. It is actually a little deeper on the frilly lip here. Also, look at this. The petals and the lip is very fuzzy, very frilly. You know what else is fuzzy and kind of frilly like? A dandelion. So I'm not entirely sure if in the natural habitat this orchid can actually grow next to the dandelions, and it's trying to attract the same pollinators. But it's just such a weird coincidence that this orchid looks and smells like dandelions. Remember yesterday we were talking about the Epidendrum radicans, which it is believed to try and imitate the lantanas. I'm wondering if this orchid is trying to imitate the dandelions. The resemblance is uncanny. And speaking about this beautiful flower, take a look how fuzzy and frilly it is. Unlike the Parishi, which did not have frizzy or okay, we're talking about hair now. It didn't have fuzzy petals, this one does. So it's not only the lip, which is this beautiful texture, but also the fuzzy petals. Sepals are not fuzzy, and this is not a glossy or waxy flower. It is pretty sensitive and fluffy. I don't think you should actually put water on it. I think it is prone to getting botrytis. Just treat it with the utmost delicacy because it does look very, very delicate. It feels very, very delicate as well. And if you have this childhood connection or whatever connection with dandelions, this is the orchid for you. I kid you not, it smells exactly like it. It even looks that way. But of course, when it dries, it's not going to produce that puff, right? So I believe that I will try, at least with the division or something, I will try to grow it cooler in my cooler setup. But the main plant I will leave as it is because I don't want to disturb it more. And I do hope that I can grow it because I'm so in love with this Dendrobium, you have no idea. It's childhood on a stick, kinda. If you're experienced with orchids and actually are living in a cooler climate than mine, and you do find this orchid at an affordable price, I would just go for it without hesitation. It's rare that I actually discover such charming little orchids, and this takes the cake, absolutely. Alrighty, so that was all filmed yesterday, and ever since yesterday, I really wanted to at least try this orchid with my colder setup. Now, I knew there were 3 divisions in that pot, so it was actually very easy for me to just pull one out. I didn't have to cut the rhizome or anything, and this is it. So let's take a little look-see at the roots since we're here. Typical Dendrobium roots, I would say. They have growing tips. They're okay, but you see the plant up top? Having this root system and having this type of plant, something's not quite right. So I suspect it is actually the warmth. Semi-hydroponics is nice, is wet, but it's not cold enough for the colder growers. And while some cooler to intermediate growers have no issue with this, others do. So the goal is to have 2 setups to work with and see which one works better. So I will use a clay pot, which as it dries, it cools down as well through evaporative cooling. And I will be using sphagnum moss combined with some perlite, pretty much Miltoniopsis setup, because sphagnum moss retains a lot of water, so this pot will not dry out excessively fast. Another thing, I will not bother removing the leca from the roots because it's not going to decompose, and if I remove it, I'm actually going to damage the roots. It's not going to be a gentle repotting. I want this orchid to not even feel what's happening, and she will not. A layer of medium at the bottom. I'm not going to compact this moss way too much, actually at all. So I'm going to arrange my orchid in the middle because I'm not sure where it kind of wants to grow at this point, and then just place medium around it. And there we have it, my orchid is repotted. Since the moss was actually soaking wet, I do not actually need to water this orchid. I'm just going to place her on a tray and put her in the location where I actually keep my cooler growers. So we'll see how this division fares in comparison to the other two, which are still in semi-hydroponics. I didn't bother those, and of course I will keep you up to date. I really want to grow this orchid and make her happy because those blooms are just fantastic. I noticed that whatever screams childhood for me, I want to keep, I want close. I guess that's my thing. And that's about it for today for the Dendrobium harveyanum. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm so in love with this orchid, and fingers crossed it will do okay in my grow space, in my environment. I will do my best anyway. So if you've enjoyed this video, you know the drill. Give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, spotlights, Q&As, all of those stuff. And if you like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a video, just turn on all notifications for my channel, and YouTube theoretically should let you know. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!